Hello everyone and welcome to this video where I'm going to be building a brand new amphibious vehicle. Now I have some experience making amphibious vehicles, including the amphibious truck you see on the left and the amphibious sea lander that you see on the right, but there's nothing kind of in between. Plus there are just not that many. We have pretty much a truck and a boat. I'd like to kind of blend this boundary and make something that fits in between, and I think you'll find it quite satisfying and useful for your own gameplay. You can thank Sheppy5 for this idea. He sent me this link and got me hooked on this really cool amphibious vehicle. Now it's called the LARC, Lighter Amphibious Resupply Cargo, and what's really cool is it can be hoisted aboard a ship just like you see here, or aboard land, and it can definitely serve as a go-between for transporting things from water to land. So it's really useful in that nature that it can kind of do that, and it's quite versatile in other ways. You could see it has a lot of applications and it gives us the full dimensions. You could see it's not very fast, and of course there are military applications in such things, but my preference and kind of the way I like to build in Stormworks is more of the exploration. So you can see that here and here as kind of a tour boat. Where I could really see this having great applications in Stormworks is the ability to put a Unicorn container and transport it to and from land, and it also serves as sort of a exploration base. So if you have exploration missions that are closer to shore or require the ability to go on land and in the water, this would be a fantastic platform. And you can see there are tons of ways to modify it and all kinds of different uses, so we're going to make sure that that is applied in the design itself. I'm going to simply start off with the Unicorn cargo size here. Now I'm not going to make this thing fit as a Unicorn cargo, not just yet, but I do want it to sort of be this size because I found that this is a good size for hoisting aboard vessels and moving it and such, so we can use this as a platform. And then of course I have to get the front kind of swooping in and we'll go from there. So you can see I got the front end in, and now what I can do is place this portion here, and we'll see the size of wheels and exactly the spacing. I do think 5x5 would be okay in this application, so something along the lines of this, especially if it could be increased in size, which they can, but definitely have to be a little lower than this. We do have to make sure that we have sufficient buoyancy in the vessel itself. There we go. The wheels are in, and you can see that the interaction with the bow here looks good. Now, one thing that I do want to do, and if we take a look at the actual LARC, is that it does have a bit of a, call it, the front end is swooping down, and then the wheel is placed quite close. There's not a big wheelbase. Instead, you have quite a bit of a rear overhang, and the ability that that gives us is to kind of climb over some nasty terrain. I got the back end looking nice now. We do have a spot here for the propellers. I'll see how I fine-tune the shape. Now, one thing to consider is that on the LARC itself, the cargo deck is a little lower, so I do have to see the interaction between the wheels and the cargo deck, but presumably something like this. And this fits one Unicorn cargo. Now, of course, I can slide it back or forward, but the problem is sliding Unicorn cargo back and forth will also cause the ship to become unstable in the water and can potentially tip it, so I'd prefer to have it kind of in the center as you see here. Now, I do want a version that can carry two Unicorn cargo, and you see here this would be kind of the idea, but I do think it actually has to be a little bit bigger than this. You'll notice that, again, with the idea of pushing a cargo back and forth in this region, you might end up creating something unbalanced. Now we can get to work on the bridge or the driver's seat, whatever you want to call it. Of course, it is an amphibious vehicle, but it is also sort of a road vehicle, so you kind of get both. And I do want to make sure that it has a good line of sight for when you are driving around the place. You definitely don't want to be in a situation where the boat ends up where you crash or you can't really see what you're doing. So it does have to be fine-tuned for the application at hand. All right, first time sitting in it, and boom. Good line of sight. The control area or bridge does look good. It does have one seat in the middle, which I do think is advantageous to what we're trying to do here. And then you can still get around here into the back area. Now the thing is shining like crazy, but off to the races we go. I just ran a quick test to see what it would look like to have 2 Unicorn cargo. But again, I'm just concerned that this back one would be way too heavy and would kind of tilt this ship way too far back. Okay, I tightened up the wheelbase, and you could see here now we got the one single Unicorn cargo slot, and we have the engine bay back here. So now it is more or less in the center, and this will allow us to transport cargo. Now, if I do want to make a version that carries or transports more than one Unicorn in the future, I'm going to have the small one, of course. I'm just going to extend it from the middle like that, and it's going to ensure that everything works properly. Now, I did mention in the beginning flexibility and versatility. Well, it will be diesel electric, so that's actually going to allow us a ton of flexibility and changing, upgrading, modding the thing. See, that even looks kind of good too. Small addition here, put the rat crane, just because with the rat crane we could actually offload the Unicorn cargo on land when we're there, so we don't have to rely on an external source to put it on. Of course, when we are actually taking a supply from a ship, I suppose the ship would lower the cargo onto the slot. Well, to make this thing actually watertight, the bottom will have to be sealed up. And once the bottom is sealed up, then we could actually start to focus on other various aspects of the build, such as, for sure, the propellers. So that's obviously very important. And we'll have to have our electric motors. So the thing will be diesel electric, so it'll have a diesel generator, but it will take power from, or it'll provide power using these little electric motors. Now I will have to see and kind of fine tune how much power I'm going to put into these, because as you could see with this many of them, 4 when it's in vehicle mode and 2 when it's in propeller mode, that will need a decent amount of power. Not a lot, but a decent amount to ensure that it stays charged up. Here is my Buckle V8 motor, the supercharged one, and I did extend it or expand it, so now it went from being an 8-cylinder to being a 10-cylinder or 12-cylinder, pardon me. So it's much larger now, and we're going to find a way to shove this here in this back compartment, kind of balancing the weight between the bridge and the engine space, and just giving a nice bit of separation between the two. Everything is placed in there. You can see it fits now. I did actually have to reduce it. It is a 10-cylinder now, so you can see the 10 cylinders. And I did fit it and squeeze it in this spot. There's gas tanks at the bottom here, and it does kind of fit the style purposes. I will eventually probably put a pipe like this for the engine air intake, just so it is a little bit more elevated. And this is the first water test. So you can see that with the current setup, it is buoyant, it is floating in the water, but it's not floating very high. So the issue with this is the second a Unicorn cargo goes in here, most likely the thing will sink. So this is one of those times when I actually like to use XML modding. So I do have this mass board from Alistair, and what I'm going to do is, I know the weight of this thing is 1200, but that's without a lot of the things. So I can go ahead and put a 500 or minus 500 anti-weight in the front somewhere and in the back somewhere. Now I do have to make sure that they're centered. Now this just gives Stormworks, in my opinion, the performance for certain vehicles that it needs. Sheppy5 and myself had a long talk about this, and while we're not necessarily fans of XML modding in a general sense, meaning like for changing styling things, there are certain applications when I definitely think it's well worth it, this being one of them. So you can see now the interaction with the water is almost too good. So this is actually way too anti-gravity, and I do have to do some further changes. Adjusted the mass a little bit, but now we are going to be seeing how it behaves with a Unicorn cargo container. Now keep in mind, this is the very light crate version, so it's not going to behave abnormally or tilt or tip over too much. It's fairly light, but I think we're going to run into issues when we put in the heavier one. And as expected, with the heavier one, it will flip right over. So that's no good. Honestly, there may just be a limitation on the weight this thing can carry reasonably, but I did add some weights on the bottom here. Now, yes, it will be able to bottom out a little bit easier with this, but those weights do and should allow us to transport something a little bit heavier, such as this. So if I spawn this in, hopefully it doesn't tip over. So yeah, you have to be careful, and you can't just overload the thing. It will tip over, but it does seem that you can have a bit of weight. Now for a little bit of fun, I do like the lights kind of looking like that inside the curved area. I do want to move this here so I can have the brand right there, and we do have a lot of these hooks for us to be able to lift it into and out of situations. I did add some other styling elements that you see here back there, and not just that, I think it is useful to have more seating. So inside the cockpit here we have 2 extra seats. Yes, kind of awkward, they get to sit here and stare at the driver, but at least you can transport more people. And then this one here is kind of good for controlling the crane. Over here we have a hatch for the engine cover and a spare tire, kind of how the one had it there on the internet. I will have to make this tire a little bit larger with XML modding because I don't want to put a full-size 5x5 wheel. Instead I put a 3x3, so I'm just going to rely on the XML modding to make it a little bit bigger. A first look at the brand name, and funny enough, this is the most similar vehicle that I found to what I want this thing to behave like. It is a diesel electric. You can see it just has a forward and back mode, and it has kind of a built-in generator. So I do want this to follow the same style and kind of have that same display and setup. Inside Pony IDE, I actually ended up changing a little bit here. Originally this display just had the battery and the RPS, which is great, but end of the day it is a gas powered generator, so I do have to put fuel. So I added that there. Now the transmission is there in yellow with the RPS beneath, and this 2 information data points there. Of course, I will put the buttons in the rest of the controller, but this will allow us to have kind of a one-stop shop for most of the controls to this thing. I have practically dissected this loader, placed the microcontrollers here for now, just for now, and you could see that we have a bit of the things plugged in, connected, all the electric is done, and now I just have to get into updating the nodes. So I did plug in everything, and that should be it. Of course, there are some fine-tuning to be done. There is some fine-tuning specifically with this. You can see we have Magol and Unicorn bottom connectors, so I'm going to change that. I do think that I want the heater to be on the control panel, And it is officially live. So you can see here, it's looking pretty good. Yes, we get a ton of glare, but if we turn it on, voila. We got the heater, we got the cab light, we got the quad steer mode, and we got a generator mode that'll just turn up the RPS even if we're at 100% battery. Otherwise, if we're not at 100% battery, it'll automatically rev up, specifically when we're driving. So you can see here, it is able to get up to that kind of 50 km/h mark, which is quite impressive, and it's keeping a nice full charge. So it does seem to be working properly. Now we do have the rudder in the back, and I didn't yet plug in the propellers because I'm going to be making a full-on amphibious mode. But you could see that it does float, it does work. Of course, we're just stuck in the water now, but that is okay, because overall I'd say this is definitely looking good. For the amphibious mode, I'm actually going to extract the same microcontroller that I used for the Amphilander. Now the thing is, that actually used clutches and direct power. Interesting enough, this is going to be much more simple. It's not going to rely on any of that. In fact, all it has are motors running in and running out. So this actually might well be overkill. This whole thing with all this stuff could probably be simplified. A very simple microcontroller. We're just using a numerical junction and controlling whether or not things go on or off based on if amphibious mode is on. In addition to that, we do have the reverse, which will just multiply anything by -1, so we get a reverse action coming out of the motors. Of course, here we do have to put a nice key button, and that key button will turn on amphibious mode. I'm going to keep the duration quite low. Interesting enough, my microcontroller from the original Rat actually already had the built-in reverse, so I didn't even have to have the reverse function here, and I don't have to have anything other than it just going directly into this. Now, that is for the wheels. I'm hoping the same is true for the propellers. And for that, there is only one way to find out. Let's go into... Oh, yeah, right yourself. Nice. May have stalled out the engine, but we'll see. Alright, so now we are officially amphibious. We're able to move. We have our rudder here. I don't have any other stabilization, so it may be a bit of a rough ride, but you can see here that is working, and we are sort of running at the same expected speed as the real life one. Now I may be able to tweak that to be a little bit faster. Anyway, if we put it in reverse, does it take us backwards? Yeah, it does. They are spinning backwards. Cool. I mentioned potentially getting more speed out of the water mode, and that is because I actually tweaked the maximum throttle you see here based on the 4 motors that are working for each of the wheels when it's in land mode. So when we are in the water, we only have 2 motors working for these 2 propellers. So either I can change that coefficient inside the microcontroller and adjust it so that when we have water mode, it turns up the throttle. When we have land mode, it reduces it or whatever. But instead, I'm just going to simply add 2 more motors. This way, the water mode and the land mode are each going to have the exact same number of motors going into the thing, and ideally that will cause it to give us a little bit more top speed. And it's working. So you can see we're still at 100% battery, and we're going 20 kilometers an hour. So we've increased the water speed quite a bit, and that should help us through all kinds of stuff. So that's looking quite good. I know there's not a lot of buttons in here, but most of my buttons are like the lights, which you can see here. And other than that, I'm just going to add a bit of a horn so we can have like kind of a sea horn, and everything else is here, whether it's the heater, the cab light, whatnot. So we do have a decent amount of options and functionality here already. So that cleans up the deck. All the microcontrollers are stowed now, and you could see that the thing is working as expected. Of course, in the bridge or cockpit, we don't have GPS navigation. We don't have sort of like a radio or other seafaring things. It isn't intended to be a long-range boat, including the fact that you have to hold W to ensure that you go. I may put cruise control, and that will at least alleviate you from having to hold W for longer treks, but it isn't really a vehicle intended for extreme long distances. One of my favorite things is making the coloring of these vehicles, and you can see how that changed the feel of the whole thing. Now maybe these aren't the final colors, but definitely something that I'm going to consider here. You can see that the shape, the size, the functionality, it all seems to be tied up and working quite nicely here. And now I'm toying around with one that is extended. So it does take a little bit extra balancing, especially because it is longer and heavier. So there's a couple of other parameters, but I will be seeing how that all works. Until then, I will be releasing the smaller version with all of my supporters. So if you are my YouTube member or my Discord server booster, you will be receiving the smaller version here to test out and use quite soon. I do want to thank each and every one of you for being supporters, for going that extra mile, you know, to support me and to show your appreciation. So if you are interested in that, I highly would recommend taking a look. But I do want to thank each and every one of you regardless, because you guys watch, you guys participate, you guys comment on the videos, you join the community, you make this community so awesome and make what I do so much fun. So thank you all, and I can't wait to see the reception on this very, very cool creation. So let me know in the comments what you think, and until next time, happy Stormworks.